So this is old and dirty now, right? Because it hasn't been cut, but I want to just offer that if this stem, when it started to get big, whether you dream of being a flower farmer or you just want to grow flowers for your kitchen table, I'm Lisa Mason Ziegler, and I grew cut flowers commercially for nearly 25 years. Now, as an author and online course instructor, I hope to inspire the next generation of growers. I'm glad you're here. Let's jump in. So this is cutting garden that I planted with some challenges. And friends, I want to say that I am living what I hear from people that actually embark on this challenge. So let's just review what the challenges were. So I always prefer to plant cutting gardens as an island, meaning that you can access from all sides, right? And I have learned from this experiment of not doing that. I planted it up against this precious little building behind me, which we call the inn. Used to be a cottage, y'all. And I thought, you know, so many people say that they have to do this, so I thought, let's do it. And so I faced the challenges that I hear from people that they suffer from. So out of the gate, the first thing I noticed was that because it's up against a building, it doesn't in fact get full bore sun all day long. So in the beginning, they were slower because what you have to understand is these plants that were planted here, the other plants that were started at the same time on the same tray were planted out in our big cutting garden, and they were so far ahead of these guys and totally related to the amount of sunlight that it got. So that was the first thing I noticed, and the most suffering of that was the actual coxcomb. The coxcomb that was planted out here was so much smaller in the beginning than what was out in full sun. They did ultimately catch up. So that brings us to failure number 2, in my opinion. Because we did take plants off of big trays of transplants and brought them over here and planted them, we had a little mix-up. So instead of actually planting Benary's giants, those are the big zinnias, on one of these two sides, in fact, Oklahoma, the precious smaller zinnias, in fact got planted on both sides. So that's booger number 2. And then booger number 3 is how difficult it was, and it was not successful, for me to install flower support netting because it's up against this building. I thought I did a really good job, but friends, we're going to take a closer look at how the netting really needs to have sound support. It's not the netting, it's the stakes and where they're installed. And I knew when I was doing this, it was iffy, and my dream came true. It was iffy. So let's take a look at the cutting garden that's not getting cut, because do you not agree that when something starts to go wrong in a garden, especially whether it's weeds growing or it's a puny existence, you just tend to ignore that area of the garden. You don't go back and try day after day, right? Well, I have basically ignored this cutting garden when I saw that they had fallen over because of the netting and that there were no Benary's giants. So, but the rest of the plants grew great, but it's just not the dreamy cutting garden that we normally grow. And let's take a look at it. So here we are, friends. And I also am realizing why when people stop cutting their garden, why they're then fueled to not cut their garden, because this is a pretty beautiful flower bed up against this sweet little building, right? But it was intended to be a cutting garden. So one thing I want to point out, look how tall the basil has gotten. You know, again, just not cutting has allowed plants to just go on and grow on beyond where we would cut them. So this is the Oklahoma mix on this side. And I want to just mention that this bed actually ends like right about here. All of this tumble out here is because it just pulled the netting away from the stakes. And it's because of the way that I was pretty much forced to do it because it's up against this building. And friends, I'd be pretty willing to say I'm a pretty expert flower support netting installer. And I still could not have good results. So this is the bed. The netting is still there. It is totally pulled that way, and it's only getting worse day by day as more plants grow and add weight. Another part of this problem, so while right now it doesn't look too bad, it'll be another 2 to 3 weeks and the grass that's not being mowed on the front of this bed is going to grow up through it. So I could just go on and on. The moral to the story at this point is I totally recommend cutting gardens with flower support netting installed to be a freestanding cutting garden so you can access it from all sides. Because I will also add, when we first started harvesting this garden, reaching to the back was a little challenging to get to where I needed to cut. So I'm just kind of proving all the points of the recommendations that I've given for decades now actually are warranted. I want to highlight, because of the behavior that usually comes when you're not having success, meaning you ignore it, it just makes the problem worse. So I want to show you. So this is old and dirty now, right? Because it hasn't been cut. But I want to just offer that if this stem, when it started to get big enough to be cut, had been cut, that would probably have, if I can get my clipper to it, that would have prevented it from getting so big and so thick and falling over, right? So we would have cut it, and there you go, right? And so I'm going to cut these and show them to you. See how bent that is? That is no good to no one. That cannot be used for a cut flower. So I'm cutting these, and there's shoots below. But what I want to show you is what is underneath here that's going to just become yet another maintenance problem. That one's not too old. Look how pretty that is. And that's really too big, right? I mean, you wouldn't put that in a mixed bouquet maybe. And so let's just clean this bed up to where it should be. Celosia strips so beautifully. And so here's one. All of this mess grew because this wasn't cut. And obviously this is an old dead one. So the whole mess that's on the verge here is all this grass that is really getting ready to just grow up and take over the bed. And so here's yet another one, but look how crooked. You know, it's the whole ignoring it, not cutting it because of other problems just makes the problem grow. So if you decided you were going to leave it as a landscape bed, that would be okay. There's another one. So that's kind of the sad story of my cutting garden. If I wanted to, we could come through and do what I just did on all the flowers, and chances are super good that it'll reflush for fall. But at this point, maybe you just want a beautiful flower garden, not a cutting garden to look at. And so friends, that's the story of our cutting garden that was planted where we recommend you don't plant it, which is up against a structure, which just starts an avalanche of issues that build off of each other. Till we meet again, friends. Ciao.